Hi, thank you for being here. In today's episode, we talk about joy and joy versus happiness because they're not the same thing. And we talk about where joy lives in your bodies, plural. You have more bodies than you realize, and it's important to have awarenesses of each one so that we can align them and have the opportunity to cultivate joy. Please subscribe to this show. Please share it with your friends. Please click the bell to get alerts when we release new episodes, and like it if you do. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
Welcome to Get Centered, where the practitioners and the clinicians of the Center for the Healing Arts and Sciences come together and talk about topics. Today's topic is joy. And before we begin, I want you to press pause and think about your definition of joy. Think about what this means to you. Now, we use these words all the time. We don't really investigate. So if you can, press pause just for a few seconds and write down what you think joy is. If you're like me, it took you more than a few seconds because I did that this morning and it took me a number of minutes to contemplate, but it's an important exercise. So I challenge you before we start talking about this to do that. And now we're back because you've just dutifully honored that request. So hi everybody. I'm excited to pass the torch over to Leila-Scott so she can quarterback our conversation today and talk about joy. Leila-Scott, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Because I'm quarterbacking joy today, we're going to get joy via the lens of Chinese medicine initially, and then we'll kind of branch out from there. But it's important to begin there for the reasons that will become evident when I run down this list. So joy is an emotion that pertains to the heart specifically. And in Western medicine, we understand the heart, the two major jobs it has are to regulate our pulses and to pump oxygenated blood throughout our bodies. And the same awareness is there for Eastern medicine too, but there is also so much more we consider for the heart organ. We consider that it is the house of the mind and the spirit, what we refer to as the Shen. Each organ in the body houses an emotion. And maybe in other episodes, we'll go over those other emotions. But for today, obviously we're focusing on joy. And so we're also going to talk a little bit about the heart. The heart is the emperor or empress of all the other organs, meaning it is the center of our being. We live in a time, an era, where the center of our being seems to be more here, but in fact, it's not. And even in embryology, the heart is formed long before the brain or before cognition comes online. And to take it even a step further, the electrical impulse that generates the heartbeat exists before the heart does. So we are energy first. We are heart energy first before anything else. As a channel, the meridian, it works its way from the major organ, so from the heart in this case, and it's going to be bilateral, but it runs down the middle, the inner aspect of the arm connecting to the middle finger, which we can relate to Western medicine in the sense that if we are going to present with heart attack symptoms, frequently we have arm pain. And then there's a branch of the channel that runs up and connects to the eyes. And how often have we heard the phrase, you know, the eyes being a window to the soul? Or you can say, you know, just something was in their eyes, something was off. You know, someone's mental or spiritual state of health and wellness can be apparent in their eyes and whether they're bouncy and shiny or dull. In the chakras, which are simply energy centers of the body, it's the first of the four heavenly bodies, which helps explain why when we have just one of those bliss moments of true, pure love, we feel kind of a pain, almost a stretching sensation around the heart. So all this to say, we are body beings with an S. We are not just a body. So we have a physical body, a mental body, an emotional body, and an energetic body. And I go like this from down here to up here because the level of density changes with each one. You know, of course, our physical body is the most dense, visible, tangible. And as we work our way up, it's less and less so, which is why, you know, at best, we tend to ignore or lack awareness of the other bodies. And at worst, we full on deny that they even exist. So for the materialists out there, you know, who really need proof, it's a little bit harder for those folks to acknowledge these other parts of themselves, but they are there. Just because they are less dense does not make them less relevant or less important to tend to. This is an important piece for those folks too. I love Einstein's quote, you can't solve a problem in the same mindset that you created the problem or using the same tools that created the problem. So how often are we having mental emotional issues and we're trying to think our way out of them? Well, that's not going to work, right? Even if you have a physical pain and you're going over the foam roller over and over again, and you're just like, God, nothing is moving. Well, probably that physical pain is there, but it's probably more of a mental, emotional, energetic situation. So approaching it from a different level is going to get you results better than trying to approach it on that same level. So we're not going to think our way into joy. It's going to be a full body experience on every level. And it involves self-discovery, self-awareness. Because if we're not aware of something, we can't affect it. The tricky piece is that it can get flipped on itself. It can get confusing because when people are trying to find joy, they want to avoid pain. And so what they do is they either go to the past or to the future. But you're not there anymore. You know, you're not there yet, or you're not there anymore. And in order to do self-awareness and the practices that are going to cultivate joy, you have to be in the here, in the now, and in the same place that your bodies are. They all have to align. So that's all the groundwork I wanted to lay down to talk about joy. I have a quote here from Catcher in the Rye. The most singular difference between happiness and joy is that happiness is a solid and joy a liquid. And we've talked about in other episodes how energy has to move. It has to be fluid, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or energetic. If it's not moving, it's stuck, and stuckness hurts. So with that, well, hold on a second. I wanted to say this because it's important that solidity, that's a word, right? Solidity, physiologically, we have problems there, right? Like if you have a heart that's hardening, you have atherosclerosis or ischemia, right? Like this is a problem. You're going to have a heart attack. And then of course we have all the other bodies that we just talked about. And the stuckness there is no less painful, but maybe a little less life-threatening imminently, you know, but worthy of attention. So I have a chart here and I just can do nothing but read through it. And then when I finish reading through it, we can discuss it. So essentially it's two columns, one for happiness and one for joy, okay? Happiness is a feeling, a noun, whereas joy is a practice and a verb. Happiness, fleeting, comes and it goes, whereas joy is permanent, it's stackable, it builds upon itself. Happiness happens to us. There's even that root word that's there, happen, happiness. It's an if, you know, if I get all green lights when I'm on my way to work, I'll be happy. If that person calls me later, I'll be happy. whereas joy is chosen consciously, and hard earned self awareness and strength and peace. It's yours to keep. Happiness tends to pertain to material satisfaction, whereas joy is when we're connected with the feeling of being spiritually connected or connected to gratitude, compassion, to self and others. Happiness doesn't tend to share space well with other emotions. So if you're happy, 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 and then all of a sudden, you know, I don't know, somebody gives you, bumps into the back of your car, all the happiness is gone. Whereas joy can coexist nicely with other emotions. So um, you can have the difficult emotions alongside joy without one having to replace the other. And in fact, the joy can help balance out the experience of the other difficult emotions. Happiness tends to be about staying in control and staying in your comfort zone, whereas joy involves a willingness to step outside of your comfort zone, to feel your growing pains, to have an awareness of your ultimate potential. Happiness does not contribute necessarily to inner strength since it happens to you, whereas joy does directly contribute to building your own self-respect and self-esteem. Happiness tends to be extrinsically derived, whereas with joy, we have the opportunity to meet ourselves through the self-study, facing ourselves and what we feel when we do that self-study, which can be very uncomfortable, but in so doing, we have an opportunity to alchemize that lead, the anxiety, the fear, the discomfort, the pain into gold, the joy, the triumph, and that strength of character in mind, body, and spirit. So, what do y'all think of all that?
So before you put your notes away, can you remind me the four levels? It's
Yes.
physical,
Physical, mental,
emotional,
emotional, spirit, or energetic.
spiritual, energetic. Okay, cool. Thanks. I'm thinking about this heart forms before the brain piece. I thought that was lovely. And I was just thinking about how I think the most trouble I get into in my own spiritual practice and life is when I try to put my brain first instead of my heart. I think there's probably some balance that needs to happen there. You can't just live only of your heart. But I'm also thinking a lot more recently about this one prayer that's like central for Jewish practice that is it's called the Shema. Rodney probably knows it from his good old days, playing in the music. So for the Jews, so yeah, the Shema is like twice a day. We're supposed to say it in the morning when we wake up and at night before we go to bed. And it's traditionally the last words you're supposed to say before you die. Like it's supposed to be your parting on your lips as you part from this world. And that that prayer really talks about um, it talks about being open to what's happening now. It talks about being like listening, not like listening just with your ears, but paying attention with all of what you are is possible to know what's happening now and here, and then not just knowing it, but also then loving it, right? And learning to be able to be in with your heart, with your then they give you this whole list of all the different levels of what how to love it with your heart and with your body and with your all of your stuff, all of your energy. And I think about that. It's been some one of those pieces that I've been kicking around. And how do I do that? How do I train myself to be loving with this moment? And what I find that is if I am doing that, I find an immense amount of joy, just like you described. And I think you're right. It just it builds. It builds. So it's like it's kind of like a practice. If you can use it this way, you can just say it rotely. but you can use it in a way of saying like, okay, so twice a day I'm really going to check in with like just my heart, right? What is my, how do I love this, whatever this is, this moment as it's happening? And maybe that will then transfer into other moments in my life, not just those two moments.
One quick thing before anyone else jumps in, I wanted to say this quote that I think is really useful when you were saying, sometimes the mind can get in the way, but we need it, you know. And I love this. It's so helpful to me, maybe to y'all too. But the mind makes a terrible master and a wonderful servant. So keeping it in its place, using it, but not letting it be the ruler.
Yeah, it's like a consultant.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, hold on, let's check with you, mind, but not
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing I meant to say earlier that might be well placed here is that we understand the emotions. The reason they're housed in organs is because we understand them to originate from there. And the brain simply processes that and tells you which one it was. But we've lately seemed to change it. People talk about, it seems like people think that emotions come from the brain and then the body just feels whichever one that was, right? And then secondarily, that the mind is somehow in the folds of the brain. No, the mind, all that awareness we were talking about, those bodies, like your mind, your awarenesses run the length of your body.
Someone recently told me a story about, all the doing neurological tests on monks and on meditators and stuff like that. And there was a situation where they'd done it and the monks were laughing and the doctors thought, well, it's because, they think he looks silly or something. That's said, no, we think it's silly because you've only put the sensors on the head. And that ties exactly into
Man, I haven't heard that before. That's good. Yeah. I want to jump in. It's kind of weird. As you were talking, Leila-Scott, I really didn't go to the places I thought I was going to go. I really went into thinking about subjectivity, and it's like the forgotten arena of analysis, because the scientific mind needs to measure it, feel it, touch it, taste it. And, we have this thing, whether it's thoughts or feelings or fantasies or our imagination, that don't allow themselves to be subjected to the processes that we've worked out and the methodology we've worked out to kind of investigate and understand our world. And that happens on both a collective level, but it also happens individually. We all, we even kind of write it off and say it's just imagination, where it's not. There's something else that's going on there, and there are layers of ourselves that are worthy of being explored. And even the leading researchers in consciousness talk about how we have many different consciousnesses, and of course then the limitations of what mind is. Is mind even, is my skin the endpoint of my mind? Yeah. And so all these questions start to come out, and because I think my definition today of joy, I was trying to be as concise as possible, and it comes off as pretty flowery and poetic, but it's true. I think that joy is when our inner world and our outer world dance. And I think that's what you were talking about being present. Because as I was really trying to define it, it's moments when you're completely tuned in and aligned and harmonious, inner and outer are they click. And we have this experience of joy. And it's nothing that we can accumulate like happiness, and I really liked, I think that list, I hope you'll send it over, because I'll post it in the liner notes. Look down below and you'll see that really great list. But I guess in my own kind of looking into joy this morning and this week in preparation for this discussion, there are practices that we can do to cultivate joy. But I think it's a little like that old Zen saying about enlightenment is an accident, but spiritual practice makes you accident prone. And that you can have this practice of things like gratitude and appreciation and prayer and connection and generosity, all that, and that joy tends to be a byproduct of those practices because you're more tuned in to self, other, and world. And that's I think that's a really wonderful thing to desire and work towards.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I really like the difference between that you talked about, Leila-Scott, about the difference between joy and happiness,
Mm.
and happiness coming from the external and happiness being fleeting and joy being more internal. And it always strikes me as interesting is that in the Constitution, it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it seems like a strange trio. And so in preparation for this, I was like, well, what was that referring to? What is the pursuit of happiness? And Jefferson took that from John Locke. And John Locke talks about happiness in two forms, an imaginary happiness and a true happiness. And I won't go into the details there, but the essence is true happiness is more, the way he used it, is more equating to meaningfulness. And I think that's, if we use happiness the way Locke used happiness, we would substitute the word for it. We'd substitute the word meaningfulness. And I think that is the essence of joy, it is meaning, it is inward meaning. And in that sense, joy is not fleeting. It is because it is in us.
Yes, 1,000% yes, meaning.
Thinking about how that pursuit in that context, like oftentimes what I've found in my own practice and in the practice of people who I've been kind of stewarding, is like you have to encounter most people have to encounter the one that's not gonna fill it up over and over. Like they have to encounter the happiness and the thing that with good intention they were trying to get to that joy place, but it just wasn't filling the cup, and they probably had to do it many times before they recognized, like, oh, like I end up after this, it's not really giving me that true happiness like you were talking about. So it's like it's sometimes like the pursuit is you're coming from the right intention of wanting to build joy, like the right kind of joy, like wholesome. I would call it some like a wholesome kind of quality that uplifts you and everybody around you and isn't just like hedonistic. And then in doing that and not getting the right feedback, you may then encounter, oh, you know what? That's not the right one. Maybe let's try a different way, right? Like maybe let's try now generosity. Maybe let's try now gratitude. Maybe let's try now all these other tools that we can build in the spiritual unfolding in order to cultivate that sense of joy. And now there's research about what cultivates joy in a lasting way, which is very interesting.
What Eddie was saying, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness really being the pursuit of meaning, and that what that gives people is hope, and I heard it defined recently as hope really is just the belief that your future will be better than your past, that you're working in a synergistic way toward, and it doesn't mean you're going to be richer than you were yesterday necessarily financially, but there's so many ways, right, that your life could be better tomorrow than it is today or was yesterday. So I don't know, that just resonated with me when you said that, Eddie.
So I've been listening in a while. I don't know. This topic was pretty hard for me to kind of get a grasp of this morning. Just because, there was news this morning through Texas board that a lot of stuff was going on. So it's really kind of hard to get in the state of mind of bringing in joy today. Kind of listening in on what y'all have said, it almost seems like joy kind of becomes a insurance, kind of how we, buy insurance to kind of, make sure we're healthy, and we're covered for a certain cost. feel like joy in correlation with that is somewhat of an assurance of some sort that we might be in control of, you know, all the details of our lives in a way. I don't know if that makes sense. Kind of like what Leila, you were talking about, you know, the state of mind in conjunction with the orientation of the heart, that it's somewhat of like a continual journey that I feel like is a container for I don't know, things like contentment, confidence, and the hope piece. But even kind of getting to the state, I mean, I came up with a couple more tangible things. If people are kind of listening in to kind of pause and notice life's small pleasures, relying on and help other people, letting a challenging or meaningful event stimulate you to think about what is really important within that moment and being very present with yourself. Always continuing to learn new things, and then also discovering new solutions if something's not working, whether it be the mind, body, spiritual components. But yeah, sometimes even for the peace on joy, it's like, okay, how can I let that in? How can I be in that present space? And if I'm not, you know, is that okay? So yeah, that was my 2 cents, just because it was so hard this morning.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, the one thing I want to go back to is that insurance analogy. And the one thing I would just push up against a little bit is that insurance is really kind of a fear proposition. You know, this might happen, so you better spend this much money, you know,
Right.
which is a control place. Whereas with joy, it's really about surrendering, you know?
So yeah, and that's actually the thing that I was writing the newsletter this morning, and I stumbled into that. You know, Brene Brown does a ton of stuff on this topic. And what's so fascinating about something that certainly clicks for me is that joy brings with it a great deal of fear, because we have a fear of it going away. And, you know, thinking of all the like superstitions that we develop, you know, around knocking on wood, for example, you know, that's like, oh my God, I feel great. Things are amazing. Oh shit. You know, you know, so there seems to be this enormous vulnerability that we end up having to feel in order to, as we say, cultivate joy. But that's, I think what's so fascinating about it is it doesn't come cheap.
Right.
You know, I mean, it may be within us and all those things, but we are all, you know, asked to cross over the threshold of surrendering our own need for control and safety and certainty and familiarity to move into the spaces where joy lives and to begin to commune with that energy. And I think that's just a fascinating thing, because it's, you know, we all, and certainly it also helps us understand why fleeting happiness is more dominant, because there are measurable ways we think that, you know, we're so materialistic and we're going to accumulate more and that's what's going to make us happy. Or, you know, when I get in that relationship, or when I have that new thing, or when those new sunglasses arrive, or when those awesome new books come, by the way, totally joyful, actually. So that I think is one thing that we're not taught as kids. Like, that fear is very natural and understandable, and that's the thing you actually need to move through in order to feel and experience this.
Yeah. I mean, even last week when we were talking about suffering, and we had to qualify, like, hold on, you know, anyone watching this is not all misery. There's a ton of joy that can be derived out of really engaging your suffering and not walking it, which is very similar to what we were saying earlier about, like, we tend to kind of flee the scene, but we have to be here. And so those walls we come up against, you know, I was talking at the dinner table with John and River the other night, you know, these walls we hit, whether you're writing or running your 13th mile or holding a pose in Qigong or yoga or something like that. It's like, why do you think all of a sudden your mind is freaking out on you? Because you're still, even though you're running, you're still, like, you have stopped everything else to the point that your emotional body is just really in your face and you can't look away. Or you can, but then you're just going to have to fight that battle again another day, you know? So that hard-earned reward, internal reward of sticking with it, meeting yourself and not running away from yourself.
This brings, Rodney, go for it.
Oh, well, I was just going to say that what you're saying with joy being able to contain the suffering or the difficult things brings up in mind for me a Buddhist analogy about the difference between climate and weather. In that, a climate is an overall thing. Weather comes and goes, whatever. Climate is something overall. And if we are able to cultivate a climate of joy in our lives, it can contain all of those other things. It can contain the difficult times as well as the happy times. And just in general, the two words that jumped out for me, we were talking were alignment and connection. And that even if we're going through difficult times in our life, if we feel connected to others, if we feel understood by others, if we have some alignment of what's happening again, internally and externally with our relationships, with what's going on inside of us, that can be a different kind of definition of joy because we are in the present and we are in alignment, which is a much larger definition. Again, like climate and weather, it's a much larger definition of whether we're happy or sad at one given moment, but it's a much bigger picture of what's going on with us.
It's funny, as I'm listening to you all and thinking about this topic, I have a confession. I have a negative reaction to joy. And I don't mean like the essence of joy. I mean when people out there in the world are talking about joy and happiness. Like I think about, like Rodney and Eddie and I were joking earlier, and it was like, man, talking about suffering is a hell of a lot easier than talking about joy. To define joy, I was really like, come on, let's get into this, man. Let me get ready. Because I think that it's a little like that spiritual trespassing or sidestepping. Like I think there are large communities out there that are approaching happiness and joy as a way of sidestepping what we were talking about earlier with the inevitability of fear. It's like, so when fear starts to show up, well, shit, I know I need to be joyful and positive and think everything is good. So I don't tend to read a lot of material on joy because I'm like, where's the fucking sacrifice and where's the intensity? Where's the realness of this? Like, because it doesn't match my experience. It can be terrifying to like offer that moment of joy. And I'm not talking about blissful moments that I have in nature with my family or something, but it's like that knock on wood thing again. Like you're right there next to parts of yourself that don't feel so good. And so I'm just having this disclosure, about, when we started talking about joy, I had a certain ambivalence about this discussion just because I think it's misappropriated a lot of times by folks that are trying to actually get out of the depths of what we might direct people towards in all of our practices.
Yes.
We see it in social media all the time. We're bombarded with people's quote unquote happiness.
Right.
And we know most of the time it's fake. We're not seeing the suffering. We're not seeing the bad times. We're seeing these curated, awesome moments, and it makes us feel bad. And it's like, well, why am I feeling bad at somebody else's happiness? Because it's incomplete and it's external, and we're never going to get happiness in that externality, because truly that's fleeting stuff, and most of the time it's not even real. It's what's real is the inward meaningful part, and that's what we're not seeing that. And I don't know.
Yeah, it's because it's like that's the truth of like there's no silver bullet, right? There's no silver bullet practice, silver bullet thing. We want it so badly but it's just not there. And when we see somebody who's like, I got the silver bullet, we're like, bullshit. You don't have a silver bullet because there is no such thing as a silver bullet. It's like we're teaching my son to swim, so we got pictures of him like floating, and there's like 45 pictures, like, you know, it's like rapid. 45 pictures of him just miserable. And there's like one, and there's one picture right in the middle where he's like serene. And we, and he's just like, he looks
Post
like,
it.
and we posted that one, obviously. It was like a very conscious, and people were like, oh, look how relaxed. I was like, that is not what it was like. He was not relaxed.
That's hysterical. And I think that's an important anecdote because I don't know that necessarily what we see posted on social media, just by at least our loved ones and close friends, I don't know that it's fake as much as it's just incomplete. You know, I think that's an important distinction. And John, I really relate with what you're saying. I feel that way about happiness.
Mhm.
Like, you know, get happier by doing this. All those self-help books that talk about happy, 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 be happier. Ugh, cut it out. It does. It feels like that BS silver bullet doesn't exist. Stop trying to bullshit me. And it reminds me of that pure solar approach to life where we just ignore the dark side of the moon or ignore that we have our own personal dark side to our own moon. You know, it's again, it's incomplete. It's not fake that we have a bright side. It's just incomplete. It's not the full story. So I hope that the way I delineated between happiness versus a cultivated joy was refreshing because it makes me sad to think that the word joy is being appropriated by the happiness factor. You know, I want them to stay separate little entities because they are so different.
It's the same reaction I have when I look over and I see a car company that has put out a car called Soul. Like, come on, guys. Like, let's have something that's sacred here. Like, Soul. Come. So as Leila-Scott, as you were saying that, I was really thinking about one kind of weird thought, and we need to be aware of time. So we'll unfortunately, this is great. So there is the term belief. The way we use the term belief is very new. It's very modern. It's propositional. It means yes or no. Like, do you believe in God? Yes or no. Do you believe in love? Yes or no. And the earlier, what it meant was follow. Like, it was more of a discipleship. You know, what do you follow? What direction do you head towards? You know, it's not like a defined place. Happiness, in the way that we know it today, is not what it originated from. Like, we've completely morphed it. And the Greek term is eudaimonia, and it's more like blessedness or prosperity. And again, not necessarily in a monetary way. I mean, when I was growing up, we didn't really have success defined by money in my family. Basically, you knew you were successful if you went on Oprah. That was a measure of success. so there, you know, today we have these weird, unfortunately, very measurable and identifiable ways of success. They tend to be correlated with rich. You know, how wealthy are you? You know, your bank account and your self-esteem are highly linked. So it's also of interest, and it's beyond the scope of this, and maybe we can set this up for a topic later, but to look at why the words themselves morph and their meaning, speaking of meaning, you know, their meaning shifts and changes, and that affects our consciousness. Language has a deep effect on our consciousness. So that's something that I think needs to be included in this. What are our associations? What are the cultural norms that are established about what these words and ideas mean? How have we conceptualized them in our families of origin, in our, you know, various cultures, and throughout time? So I think I'm leaving today with a larger question and maybe another episode.
Sure.
Y'all have any other, what kind of threads are hanging out there still? I know we got to finish in just a bit, but anything else?
I have a couple. I just wanted to note that eventually we'll get to the other organs and their other associated emotions, but happiness is not one of them. It's not one of them.
What are the emotions in the kind of Chinese medicine worldview? Interesting.
Yeah. And that it can feel very corny, but if you're looking for, it's not a silver bullet, because believe me, it is hard and it's awkward, especially at first. But if you are looking for a start to a practice to find joy is a laughter practice. It really moves the energy, and oftentimes when you need it the most, you might find yourself moving very quickly into tears. So it will get the energy moving that's been stuck and hardened and preventing the feeling of joy. So if you find yourself in a room alone and you're willing to put your hands over your liver, which is like your right side, just underneath your lower rib cage, and just start to laugh, you know, and see what happens. And this morning, John knows this story, but I let our little one come on a walk.
Sorry.
I let our little one come on a walk with me, and it really was probably not the right decision, but I was trying to kind of tell her what I was going to tell y'all to just kind of feel prepared. And she grabbed my phone and deleted the note with all my notes. And thankfully I had printed them out before, and it was really mainly for that chart that I didn't want to miss out on. But it was this opportunity because of course I was I mean, everything in my body just wanted to feel anger, and that was legitimate. It's not that I'm denying that that wasn't legitimate, but I had an opportunity to either let that stick, right? And we call it liver chi stagnation, stuck, or to move it. So it sounded a little witchy at first, but I started to go, you know, and she goes, "Mommy, what are you doing? You sound silly." And I said, "Well, honey, I'm trying to move through some anger so it doesn't get stuck," you know, and it was like really hard to do. But hopefully it was a little seed of a message for her to remember too. And maybe a seed for all of us here, for myself even, that, you know, even when you get a phone call, it's not great news, or you get a bill you're not expecting in the mail, you go, what are we going to do about this one? You know, you can move that energy a little bit with some laughter.
Thanks for being such a good mama for our daughter. It's a good moment.
Mm-hmm.
An example for our team.
Yeah. All right, folks, we got to start shutting it down. Any other lingering thoughts? Going once, twice, and 3 times. All right, guys, really nice. I'm glad we had this conversation, because I was a bit weird about it, and I'm really happy we're doing this together, and I'm just really overjoyed to be here with you guys. And for you guys listening, be sure to subscribe to the page, click the bell to get notifications when new episodes come out, and like the episode. That helps us and these wicked amazing algorithms that exist out there in the world. It helps with findability. So thank you for watching. Thanks for being here, and thank you guys for joining in this discussion. Really feel grateful.